Now that the end of the NBA's regular season is here, it's time to look back on everything that's happened to this point and reflect. When the season began, every team set out with their own individual goals in mind for what they wanted to accomplish and in turn made moves and decisions trying to get those things done. But now, in hindsight, some of those things have backfired, and that brings us to today's video. In this video, we'll be discussing the 6 biggest regrets by NBA teams of the 2023 season. These are moves or decisions that were made either with the intention of helping the team progress forward, or made because the team felt like they would be set up for success. But now, at the end of the season, they have ended up being huge mistakes that these teams wish they could go back and change. Before we start though, it turns out a good amount of you watching right now aren't even subscribed to the channel, so if you enjoy the content, consider hitting the subscribe button, as not only does it help out a ton, but I would also very much appreciate it. Now with that being said, let's begin. The first major regret of the 2023 NBA season that we'll be discussing today is the Timberwolves trading for Rudy Gobert. When the Timberwolves snapped their playoff drought last season before losing in the first round, the front office was clearly under the impression that the team was just one piece away from competing for a title, and as a result, paid the price tag for a blockbuster superstar all-in move when they gave up 5 players, 4 first-round picks, and a first-round pick swap to acquire Rudy Gobert's services. But the issue, obviously, has been that Gobert is not the missing piece that can put them over the edge, and now in hindsight, that price tag is absolutely insane. Last year, the Timberwolves were the 7 seed in the West. This year, they're the 8 seed, with no guarantee that they'll even make it out of the play-in tournament, and worst of all is that there are glaring chemistry issues flaring up at the worst time possible for them. Rudy Gobert and Donovan Mitchell notably didn't get along very well when they were in Utah, and now Gobert is literally getting into fights with his teammates on the bench during games, so it doesn't take an expert to assume that maybe Gobert is difficult to work with in the locker room, and the fact that the Wolves gutted their assets to acquire him only to go backwards in the standings makes this trade one of the biggest regrets of the year. The next big regret we'll be discussing today is the Golden State Warriors choosing to give Jordan Poole a max contract extension over Draymond Green. This summer, the Warriors were in a predicament where they had the money to extend 2 players, but 3 of their primary contributors were seeking a payday, meaning one of them would have been left out. Draymond Green has been the heart of the team for almost a decade now, with his defense, playmaking, and effort on both ends, but he's getting up there in age, while Jordan Poole and Andrew Wiggins are younger and could help kickstart the next generation of the team. Then, when Draymond got into a physical altercation with Poole in training camp, the team sided with Wiggins and Poole contract-wise, and in the moment, it's understandable because you can't physically fight teammates and not face consequences for it, but ultimately, Jordan Poole may not actually prove to be worth a max contract, and Draymond remains much more important to the team's success. Poole is a flashy volume scorer with the pizzazz to wow the crowds and make entertaining highlights, but overall he's inefficient with the way he goes about getting his production, and defensively he's not great either. Plus, with Steph Curry and Klay Thompson showing that they still have a few more good years in them, his skill set becomes redundant. Draymond has a player option for next year, so he might be back, but if he chooses to opt out of it and sign elsewhere, then the Warriors will definitely feel his absence next year. The next big regret we'll be discussing today is the Washington Wizards giving Bradley Beal a supermax contract extension. This was probably the most blatantly obvious one to land on this list, and it was abundantly clear from the moment that it happened. Bradley Beal has been doing a whole song and dance about how badly he wants to win, while also pledging his allegiance to the Wizards, when realistically he knew a big payday was coming his way, and the Wizards, for whatever reason, forked it all over and then some. The Wizards weren't even good enough to partake in the play-in tournament this year, and both Kyle Kuzma and Kristaps Porzingis may be opting out of their contracts in free agency this summer to test the waters. If they both leave the team, then they'll have some money to spend on free agents this summer, but the Wizards just are not that appealing of a free agent destination, with no realistic path to contention anytime in the near future. Beal is also not someone who performs like a supermax player, so making a player player who's maybe the 25th or 30th best player in the NBA, one of the 5 highest players in the NBA, was only ever going to backfire, and if Beal does end up requesting a trade, then the fact that they also gave him a no-trade clause in his contract means that they will only be able to trade him to a destination that he approves of, further hampering themselves. The next big regret that we'll be discussing today is the Mavericks trading for Kyrie Irving. On the day of the NBA trade deadline this year, the Dallas Mavericks were sitting in 4th place in the Western Conference standings. Today, the Dallas Mavericks are eliminated from the playoffs without even finishing with a chance to earn their way in through the play-in tournament, as they finished in 11th place in the West. Admittedly, there was only a 3.5 game difference between themselves and 11th place at the time of the deadline, so the gap was very small, but the fact that they collapsed completely down the stretch after making a win-now move is going to come under heavy scrutiny. A lot of people are going to blame Kyrie Irving too, and I get it, but I think the biggest reason that this move is a regret is because of the fact that they neglected their real issues through the move and made their weaknesses even weaker as a result. The Mavericks defense was porous all season long, and when they traded away Dorian Finney-Smith, one of their only good defensive players in the trade, it made them even worse on that end, as they were the 23rd ranked defense at the time of the trade, and between then and the end of the season, they ranked 27th defensively, falling into the bottom 5 of the league. Putting up points was never their issue to begin with, so when they sacrificed their already weak defense for more offensive firepower, their downfall came because they couldn't get stops when they needed to. The next regret we'll be discussing today is the Miami Heat's decision to run it back this year. Last season, the Heat were the 1 seed in the East, they made it all the way to the conference finals, and were a shot away from a berth in the NBA Finals. After a run like that, one would assume that they would want to build on that momentum to get themselves over the hump, but instead, this summer, they basically stood pat with what they have. PJ Tucker was the only notable free agent that they lost from last year's team, but the issue is that they didn't add anyone to replace him or even add anybody at all. They re-signed Victor Oladipo, and they gave Tyler Hero a contract extension, but that was really it regarding what they did. No role players were brought in, no front court depth was added, nothing. This proved to be what would hold them back as well, because outside of Bam Adebayo, their front court rotation was a mess this season, and as a result of it, they've gone from sitting atop the conference to now having to fight their way out of the play-in tournament to even take part in the postseason. Bringing in Kevin Love and Cody Zeller from the buyout market was decent progress on this topic, but Love is well past his prime, and Zeller isn't really a difference maker at this point in his career either, so ultimately, they're looking back wishing they got more aggressive. And finally, the last regret we'll be discussing today is the Clippers signing John Wall in free agency. This is an unfortunate one to land on the list because when Wall first got to the Clippers, he was genuinely excited to get back to playing and to help the Clippers get back into contention. At first, he and the team seemed like an ideal fit as he was able to push the pace in a way that they hadn't seen from their prior point guards, but as time went on, his shot selection became worse and worse. His shot was not falling nearly efficiently enough to justify the quality of looks that he was taking, his defense was being taken advantage of, and overall, the Clippers were over 7 points worse with him on the court compared to when he was on the bench. His tenure with the team ended with him getting benched completely for the last 15 games he was there, before ultimately getting traded away at the trade deadline, so the experiment didn't quite work out as planned. And with that being said, that's all I have for you today. Make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and comment down below what you think teams around the league are regretting from this year. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time.